What happened in Episode 3 of The Rings of Power? Let's break it down. On this channel we cover The Lord of the Rings, A Song of Ice and Fire, The Witcher and much more. The best in fantasy books and TV shows. If that sounds good, then please consider clicking the subscribe button in the bottom right of your screen and the bell icon. Let's start by seeing what was going on with the Harfoots. Nori is still trying to help the stranger, Meteor Man, and steals the page from Sadoc's big book of knowledge that talks about the stars that the stranger keeps drawing. She's convinced that this is where he wants to go. She also seems convinced that her helping the stranger is meant to be, somehow, a task she has to do, not because she's special, but because he is. And she seems to believe this so strongly she's willing to break her people's laws, lying, stealing, bringing a potentially dangerous stranger into their midst. And inevitably, she is found out. The stranger reads the star map by firelight and it catches fire. More fire imagery for Meteor Man. I think we now have enough clues to make an educated guess about his identity. Look out for a video on that tomorrow. Anyway, he gets discovered. Nori probably technically should be de-caravanned for what she did, basically being cast out from her people. This was the level of risk she knew she was taking, but Sadoc is lenient on grounds of her age. Not everyone agrees. While all this is going on, the Harfoots are having their annual harvest festival and are preparing to set off for their migration the next day to the Grove. We don't know what or where that is yet. Perhaps we'll find out next time. They sing happy songs about nobody goes off trail and nobody walks alone, and there's a moving little ceremony where Sadoc names those they have lost on previous years. But to be truthful, there appears to be a dark underside to this, because for all the fine community words about nobody walking alone, the caravan is quite a brutal place. If you've fallen ill or broken your ankle helping set up the community festival site, say, and cannot walk, you will simply be left alone to fend for yourself, you and your family. There's no community spirit of helping each other here, which is understandably a worrying prospect for Nori's family, as her father did indeed break his ankle. The contrast between community celebrations while camped and ruthless keep up or be left behind while travelling is stark. They set off, and Nori's family are soon left behind. The caravan will not wait for them. Only Poppy seems to even care enough to pause, but this is where the stranger comes in. He can help pull their cart. For better or worse, he is now tied in with the Harfoots for the duration of their journey. Moving south, we meet up with Arondir, who got captured by orcs last week. He soon discovers that he's not alone. His companions from the Watchtower have also been captured. The orcs are using them and the others they have enslaved to do their hard labour, particularly the work that needs doing outdoors in the sunlight. It wasn't until the invention of the Uruk-hai much later that orcs could stand daylight, hence them burrowing underground so much, covering themselves in heavy cloths and creating those tented corridors. The orcs have remained undercover for a long time, which is how they've remained undetected for so long, I suppose, but soon surely someone will notice what is going on here. Vast swathes of land are being destroyed, and at some point someone will notice that Arondir's group did not return home as ordered. Arondir tries to escape, of course, but to no avail, and the orcs prepare to show him to Adar, their leader. The identity of Adar will be another mystery for this season, I suspect. Arondir's commander speculated that it could be Sauron by another name. I suspect it isn't, but there is an interesting clue in his name. Adar means father in Quenya, the High Elf language. An interesting name, and an interesting language for him to be named in. The orcs, let's not forget, were originally made by Morgoth as corruptions of, and a mockery of elves. Adar is also the title of the whole episode, incidentally. It refers to Adar himself, of course, who stalks into view at the very end of the episode, but fatherhood also plays a role in the other stories, Nori's father, and a couple of times in Numenor. Because the majority of the story this time is set in Numenor. The ship that picked up Galadriel and Helbrand at the end of last episode was a Numenorian one, captained by Elendil. We know Elendil, of course. He's Isildur's father and was leader of the faithful who escaped Numenor to establish the kingdoms of Arnor and Gondor. Here, his background seems to have been changed a bit. He's a ship's captain from a once noble line, rather than the heir to Amandil, mighty lord and member of the King's Council, And to be truthful, there are quite a few changes to the background of Numenor on show here. This was inevitable given the time contraction on display, but it's good that some things, like Elros, Elrond's twin brother, being the first king of Numenor, are retained. Anyway, Galadriel and Halbrand get picked up by Elendil, who takes them to Queen Regent Miriel and advisor Pharazôn. It's clear that elves are not particularly welcome here. They have been banned for generations, so what are they going to do with Galadriel? She rather haughtily demands that they put her on a ship back to Middle-earth, and when pushed, asserts that they only have Numenor because of the elves, so the least they could do is give her a boat. This is a bit much from Galadriel, to be honest. Numenor was a gift to these humans from the Valar themselves in recognition of their valour in fighting Morgoth in the First Age. Tolkien does repeatedly say that younger Galadriel was very proud, so perhaps that's what's going on here, but she's making a habit now of just rather rudely demanding things from people. In any event, it will have confirmed a lot of the anti-elf biases many of the people of Numenor already had. Thankfully, Halbrand steps in and talks them out of trouble. The result is still the same. They still don't have a ship, but they will be treated as guests for 3 days rather than prisoners. Twice in this episode, Halbrand seems to just turn on the charm and win people over, here and later in that bar. It's quite a trick. More clues to who he might be, I think. We'll come back to that in a second. We meet Elendil's family at this point. Isildur is training as a sea cadet, but doesn't seem to want to do it as a career. Eärien, his daughter, a new character for the show, has just joined the Guild of Builders. Guilds are a huge thing in Numenor, by the way. You can't practice a trade without being a member of a guild. And Anarion, his other son, seems to be missing. There's clearly some tension here. Perhaps he had a falling out with his father. I'm sure we'll learn more as the show progresses. Galadriel now uses her time to poke about in the Hall of Lore with Elendil, who has been assigned to keep an eye on her. She checks through old tomes and scrolls. She makes a breakthrough in her hunt for Sauron. That sigil, or sign she's seen a couple of times, isn't a sigil. It's a map. The idea is that in the event of Morgoth's defeat, his forces could regroup and establish a new base under the command of Morgoth's successor, Sauron. This map would show them where to go. This clearly is what is happening in the Southlands plot. Adar and the Orcs are slowly establishing a new base for their leader. Is Adar Sauron, or is that just a misdirection? And this does raise other questions. Yes, it makes sense to leave the map sigil at an old base far to the frozen north where Sauron might expect Orcs and the like to discover it, but why take the time to carve the map onto the arm of one of his enemies that he's just killed? Surely he would know that someone like Galadriel would see it and hunt down its meaning, so why do it? That remains a mystery. The other thing Galadriel finds a bit more information about is Halbrand. That sign that hangs around his neck is the sign of a king who had once united the Southlands. We heard a reference to a returning king from one of the Southlanders back in episode 1, if you remember, and now Galadriel concludes that Halbrand is that heir. These threads are starting to tie together. She doubles down on her plan. She will go with him to the Southlands, set him up as king, and vanquish the Orcs. She claims that they were brought together by a power greater even than fate. Halbrand is typically evasive during this conversation, saying enigmatic things like, "The heir to this mark is heir to more than just nobility," and claims that he stole it from a dead man. I tend to think that he's probably telling the truth with that last statement, as it happens. Anyway, he quite reasonably points out that she is also stuck on Numenor and doesn't have an army, so it's all a bit of a moot point. She, confident as ever, says that will soon change. How, we don't know yet. But fate or providence is strong in Tolkien's world, and it's clear Galadriel was indeed meant to come here. Queen Regent Miriel tells her father that the elf they foresaw has arrived, bringing with it the moment they feared. We're told that Miriel's father was ousted because of his pro-elf sentiments. If this is the same person as in Tolkien's history, Tar Palantir, he did indeed have a vision of the downfall of Numenor. The further into Galadriel's story we get, however, the more confident I am that Gil-galad sending her to Valinor to prevent her from fanning into flame the evil she seeks to extinguish will ironically lead directly to her doing just that. Here she is, causing trouble and fulfilling prophecy in Numenor, and planning to lead an army to the Southlands, certainly fanning some flames. Things would have been very different if he had just sent her back to the frozen north. But what do you think? What struck you most about this episode? Let me know in the comments below.